we're going to add some automated testing to our little word counter. So testing is very important and also very time consuming. And as good developers, we should be looking to automate as much of these laborious, time consuming tasks as possible. And so the purpose of unit testing is essentially have another piece of code that runs your code and tests it to make sure that it's returning the right values. And so later, when you make your changes to your application, or when another developer comes by and starts to make changes to your application, they can rerun the unit tests and confirm that they did not break anything. Because nobody wants to sit there and go through and test all the different regression scenarios, make sure that they didn't break anything. This is especially very critical in open source software, where you expect other people to help you write code, and so as they make changes to the application, some of these changes could be relatively large. You want them to have a better idea of that they didn't actually break anything, right? And so this is again a very straightforward example. So we're just going to add a couple tests, just so that you can see kind of how to implement them and also how to run the tests and what's involved in writing them. So in this directory, I have my word counter and then my object, and then I also created a new directory called tests. And inside of tests, I have my test word counter. So let's go ahead and start fleshing out the test word counter with our tests. So the first thing that we want to do is from the counter, we want to import our counter object. And then we want to implement a bunch of test methods. So I'm going to start by just kind of outlining my test scenarios, right? So the first one there is we want to make sure that it returns the proper count of words, right? So we pass 10, and this scenario we expect get the 10 top results back. And then we want to make sure that maybe it'll run back if we pass in a different number, and then we want to also have a test for making sure that it actually gets the right words out. Generally, a best practice is for every test to test only one thing. Only, so you don't want to have combined tests that test maybe like the count of words that are being returned, and also that the right words are being returned, and many other things. So you want to keep these tests as isolated and independent from each other as possible. And so here's my test for making sure that the top words are being returned. So let me go ahead and run my tests right now and see what happens. Alright, and we have 2 tests that passed. Cool. Alright, so one of the things that we start realizing when we start writing tests for our code is that in order to make your code testable, we need to alter the logic of our code sometimes. And again, this was a very simple object that we created, but this object turns out is very hard to test. Why? Because it's very coupled to the actual file input and output. A better object would have been if we created a counter and then we just passed into it the data. And that way you wouldn't be coupled to a specific file. You could just pass to it lines of text, for example, and it would count and add them all up and maybe do some of the processing that it wants to do. But in this scenario, this counter is coupled to this file, which is fine for this example. And so what I'm going to do is in my tests, I'm going to need to pass a file to this instance and then compare the output. So let's go ahead and just create a mock file. And then we can run our tests on that. So what I can do is I can let's see, we got our Alice over here, and so what I can take is I can take the last 200 lines of Alice, and I can put it in tests short Alice.txt. And so now we have this a smaller text file that we can use for our for our testing. So the idea is here that we're gonna in our test we'll parse this file and we'll compare the output here. So let's go ahead and pull it in here. And then, all right, let's go ahead and start here. So, top 10 words. So this list is going to be the top 10 words from this file, and then we want to assert that the length of a list is equals to 10. And this is what actually compares the output of our program to the desired value here, which is 10. Let's go ahead and run our test again and see what happens. Uh-oh. Oh. Wow. There we go. So I worked out all my typos, and now you see that we still have 2 tests pass. Now if let's say for some reason I made a mistake and this code returns 9 entries instead of 10, then when I run these tests, it's going to fail. It's going to tell you, hey, these lists are not equal, right? And so let's go ahead and run this on. Let's just do here. Let's leave it as the default of 5, and then we're going to assert that these top 5 words are certain words, right? And so this is kind of a hacky solution to this. I don't recommend doing this in production, but again, for this kind of example, I think it's fine. So I'm going to take my word counter, I'm going to run it. File is going to be tests short Alice, and then the words are going to be 5, and so I'm going to just get these values here, and then I'm going to paste them in here. So now let's go ahead and run our test again. Oh. And of course I need to make sure that I'm not comparing the length. And there we have it. And so now, we have these 2 tests, not much. But now, for example, if we change the behavior of this object, and then, maybe we skip some words over here, or, we don't parse over lines, then we will get, the unit test will fail, and we'll know that, hey, we broke something in our tests. We broke something in our changes. Let's go back and make sure that, we fix it before we ship the code. And generally speaking, unit tests are, they're time consuming to write, and it sucks because they push out your deadline, but overall you will thank yourself later if you have them. So I highly suggest you do at least some automated test coverage. Maybe just only, if you're limited in time, just do them just for like the critical pieces of the application. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think.